For centuries, this aria has been untouchable, a masterpiece every singer approaches with reverence, afraid to alter even a single breath. It's been performed in the grandest opera houses by the most celebrated voices, each one clinging to tradition as if it were law. But then, Paul Brownn stepped on stage. From the very first note, it was clear this would be no ordinary performance. He didn't just sing the aria, he dismantled it, rebuilt it, and infused it with something entirely his own. Every phrase twisted unexpectedly, every pause charged with electricity. By the time he reached the final soaring note, half the audience was gasping, and the other half was on their feet. Some call it genius, others call it blasphemy. But one thing's certain, Paul Brownn has ignited a fire in the world of opera, and the echoes of this performance will be felt for years to come.
Paul Brownn rethinks a classic opera aria with a twist. Classic foundation, vici d'arte. What happens when a timeless piece of music gets completely reimagined by a visual genius? This is the story of how the legendary designer, one of opera's most beloved moments. Brownn was a man whose work graced, even earned Olivier Award nominations. For this production, he didn't just design a set. He deconstructed a classic, challenged its story, into a breathtaking, modern masterpiece. We're going to break down exactly how he did it, to the final, unforgettable performance. To really get the revolution, you first have to understand the original. We're talking about Giacomo Puccini's Tosca, which is pure, high-stakes drama. It's a thriller, really, a story of passion, power, and politics, around the year 1800. And at its heart is one of the most famous soprano arias ever written, Vici d'arte. It translates to, I lived for art. And with this aria, context is everything. The fiery opera singer, Floria Tosca, is trapped. Her lover, the painter Cavaradossi, is being tortured just off stage by the corrupt chief of police, Baron Scarpia. Scarpia wants Tosca, and he's given her an ultimatum. Give yourself to me, and your lover goes free. Refuse, and he'll be executed. Right here, in this moment of ultimate crisis, Tosca doesn't scream or fight. She sings. She turns inward and asks God why she, a woman who has dedicated her life to art, love, and faith, is being forced to suffer. For 100 years, the staging of Vici d'arte was often predictable. You'd see a distressed diva, lit by a dramatic spotlight, sink to her knees and sing her pain directly to the audience. It's powerful, yes, but it's a performance we've all come to expect. The focus is almost entirely on the singer's voice. But what if that frame could become part of the picture? What if the room itself could tell the story of her psychological breakdown? A vision of truth and terror, Paul Brownn's set design. This is where Paul Brownn's genius comes in. Brownn, who sadly passed away in 2017, was called a dealer in truth and beauty, a designer who found raw human center. For director Jonathan Kent's new production of Tosca at London's Royal Opera House, Brownn wanted to build a psychological prison. His vision was cinematic and brutally realistic. This wasn't some grand, generic room in a palace, it was Scarpia's lair. Brownn designed a massive, imposing study in the Palazzo Farnese. The scale was overwhelming, with towering walls that seemed to dwarf the characters, making them feel like pawns in a much bigger, more dangerous game. But it's the details that are truly terrifying. Brownn created a room where power felt absolute. One entire wall was lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. In a chilling twist, however, the shelves were almost completely empty. This suggests a sudden, violent takeover, or maybe that the law and knowledge they're supposed to represent are just a hollow facade. And hidden behind a section of these fake, empty shelves was the door to the torture chamber, a machine of state-sanctioned terror, hiding in plain sight. This is the key to his deconstruction. By creating a space that felt so real, so oppressive, and so inescapable, Brownn completely changed the dramatic formula for Vici d'arte. Tosca was no longer just a singer on a stage, she was a specific woman trapped in a specific, horrifying place. The set wasn't a backdrop anymore, it was an active antagonist. It was the physical embodiment of Scarpia's power and cruelty. A new harmony of sight and sound. Paul Brownn didn't rewrite a single note of Puccini's music. But he created a visual world so powerful that it inspired a whole new musical and dramatic interpretation. His design wasn't just an answer, it was a question for everyone involved. How would you act in this room? The partnership with director Jonathan Kent was essential. Kent's staging, fueled by Brownn's design, aimed for a gritty, visceral naturalism. The big duet between Tosca and Scarpia in Act 2 became less of a stylized operatic showdown and more of a grimy, sweaty, desperate struggle. And that raw realism directly affected the music. Think of it this way. If you're singing in a vast concert hall, you project your voice outward. But if you're trapped in a claustrophobic, terrifying room, your voice might become more internal, more fragile, more real. Critics and audiences definitely noticed this synergy. In productions that used Brownn's set, the performance of Visi d'arte often transformed. Instead of a grand, public lament, it became a shattered, introspective prayer. Singers, responding to the psychological pressure of the room, found different colors and textures in their voices. Conductors might subtly slow the tempo, letting the visual tension bleed into the music itself. The silence between the notes became as heavy as those oppressive, empty bookshelves. And that's the twist. The reimagination wasn't just visual. It was a complete reinterpretation where the design actually changed the sound. This new musical arrangement wasn't written on a page, it was born in the performance itself. So, let's put it all together. The grand reveal, the reimagined aria. Instead of one spotlight isolating the singer, the whole stage is lit with a shadowy, atmospheric light. The sheer scale of the room is palpable. Tosca is a small figure in a vast, cold space. When she starts Visi d'arte, she isn't singing to us. She's alone in her cage. Her hand trailing along the cold, empty bookshelves, a physical link to the soulless power that has trapped her. She sees the dinner Scarpia has laid out, a grotesque parody of civilization. She sees the door to the torture chamber, a constant, silent threat. Her voice, when it comes, isn't a performance. It's a thought, a broken whisper that grows in strength. Our eye can now follow her, cutting from a close-up on her anguished face to a wide shot that screams isolation. We can focus on the single knife on the dinner table that will soon become her only escape. The result is almost unbearably tense. We aren't just hearing her sing about her art. We are watching a woman, an artist, realize that her art and her faith can't save her from the brutal reality of this room. The aria becomes a moment of psychological fracture, and the set is the architecture of her breakdown. When she finally finds the resolve to kill Scarpia, it feels less like a dramatic plot twist and more like a terrifying, inevitable result. This is what happens when visual genius and musical genius find a perfect, terrifying harmony. The Jonathan Kent and Paul Brownn production of Tosca premiered in 2006 and has been revived more than a dozen times since. It proves that a classic isn't some fragile thing to be kept under glass. It's a living work of art that can be challenged, taken apart, and reborn. Paul Brownn's vision for Visi d'arte did more than just create a beautiful stage. He redefined the relationship between sight and sound in a beloved opera. He showed that a set designer could be a dramatist, that wood, paint, and light could be just as expressive as a human voice. He forces us to see the story in the walls and hear the music in the architecture. His work reminds us that sometimes, the most radical twist is simply a deeper search for the truth. His legacy lives on in every production that dares to ask, what if we saw this story in a completely new light? What classic work of art, be it a play, a movie, or an album, would you love to see totally reimagined? Let us know your ideas down in the comments. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Opera Brownn, and hit the bell for more. Thank you for watching, and remember, great art doesn't just live in the past. It's waiting to be rediscovered. And just like that, something ancient becomes new again. Paul Brownn didn't just reinterpret an aria, he reimagined what opera could be. He took a timeless melody and threaded it through modern emotion, reshaping tradition without erasing it. The result? A piece that doesn't just echo the past, it speaks to the present. Bold, unapologetic, human, because that's the power of opera in the right hands. It can break rules, bend time, and still bring you to tears in under 3 minutes. So if this moved you, even just a little, remember, opera isn't dead. It's evolving. And voices like Paul Brown's are the reason why. If you believe in that kind of transformation, subscribe, like, and share this with someone. Because what we just witnessed was the future in full voice.
Whether you see it as brilliance or betrayal, Paul Brownn has proven one thing: opera is far from dead. His fearless reimagining of a classic aria has shattered expectations and reminded us that even the most sacred traditions can be reborn. But this is just one story in the grand, untamed world of opera. Here on Opera Brownn, we uncover the performances that shock, inspire, and change everything you thought you knew about this art form. If you felt the power of Paul Brownn's daring twist, imagine what's still waiting to be discovered. Subscribe to Opera Brownn and join us as we step beyond the curtain into the drama, the passion, and the unforgettable voices that make opera eternal.